Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Lauri Asbury of R-Neenah is a Republican candidate in the 55th Assembly District. The primary is August 11. Lauri, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
My first question is something on your campaign website. This election, most consequential in our lifetime. Please explain.
Well, if we would have been running under normal circumstances, I think my opinion would have been completely different. But everything that is going on in the world right now with the pandemic and how it's impacted not only our communities, but also our state and our nation, as well as the world, it's going to make a big difference about leadership and who we have in office. And I firmly believe that everything can happen at a local level. That's where the changes are going to be able to be made. That's where the impact is going to happen. And that's why I feel so strongly about this, is we're going to need local leaders to step up to the plate to help us navigate this, bring us together, and move us forward.
Well, the governor's warned that the pandemic, which you just alluded to, could result in $2 billion less in state tax collections in this year.
Right.
If you're a member of the assembly, you could face a tough choice. Do you cut spending or do you raise taxes and fees? Where are you on that issue?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's something I've been monitoring all along. In my past, I have had experience as just a civilian, as it were. I was a volunteer for the school district, and we were part of a budget oversight committee. And at that time, that's exactly what we were doing, is looking really hard at what money was available, what we needed to accomplish for the district, for the students, and for the staff. And we did have to make some hard cuts, but we evaluated our programs, and it is the perfect time to look and make sure that there's no inefficiencies, there's no additional spending that doesn't need to be happening. We've really got to review our processes. So when I'm in the assembly, that's exactly the same methodology that I would use, is take a look at the programs that we've got in place right now. What is our revenue? What's coming in? What's our shortfall? And how can we fix that? We do need to make sure that there's no wasteful spending. We need to make sure government is as efficient as possible. And I am prepared to make hard cuts if that's what has to happen. I'd rather not. And in this climate, Wisconsin already has one of the highest tax rates in the nation. So we want to be very mindful of our taxpayers, but also understand that we're going to be needing to look at alternate sources of revenue for our because we haven't received what we normally would. And So, yes, I'm prepared to look into that.
New subject, the debate over who should draw the next congressional and legislative boundary lines. The Constitution says the party in power in the Capitol should do so, but the governor's recommended a people's commission that would draw lines and then forward them to lawmakers. What's your position on who should draw those next set of lines?
Well, first and foremost, I'm all about fair, free, safe elections. Being able to go and vote. Voting and elections are the cornerstone of our democracy. So my opinion on that is that it needs to be a bipartisan effort. Everyone needs to go to the table, and we need to come up with something that we can all work together with. And that's my opinion. It needs to be a bipartisan effort where everybody comes to the table.
Thank you. Americans know a lot more than they did 2 months ago about how some police officers treat those in custody. The governor's recommended a 9-bill package on police reforms. It would ban chokeholds, ban no-knock warrants, and establish uniform training standards for those that want to be police officers. Are you supporting the governor's changes or any other changes?
I would definitely want to look very closely at what is happening, and we have learned a lot. You're absolutely right about that. First and foremost, I am not in favor of defunding the police department. And so I would really want us to make sure that our police departments are a community police force. They represent the community. And yes, we should not have chokeholds. We should not have, any kind of mistreatment of people in custody. Universal training, I have absolutely no problem with that. I'm not sure if that includes, implicit bias or de-escalation training. Mm-hmm. I'm all for those types of things. But the most important thing to me would be that our police force needs to work with the community. And, one of the ways that it also needs to be representative of our community. So, for example, if, our city is made up of a certain ethnic group or certain, we're 20% Black, our police force should reflect that. We've got to have those people in place so that we can have a great, relationship develop between the two. They understand each other.
Okay. What's your position on both medical and recreational marijuana?
That's a good question. I've been watching other states as they've rolled out their different platforms. As a parent and the wife of a physician and, being healthcare minded, I have absolutely no problem with us looking at it for medical marijuana. I think that should be something we should really seriously consider. And the reason behind that is because we need to combat an opioid crisis that's happening in our area. And this could be one of the tools in our toolbox that could help relieve pain in a different way or be used for in other ways on a medical platform, and could help us to kind of back away from, the opioid addiction that, is happening when doctors see that as possibly the only thing to prescribe when, someone is in pain. As far as recreational, I would really want to consider the opinions of medical professionals. I would be very hesitant to approve medical or regular recreational marijuana at this point, okay, without really fully looking at what has happened to our communities with regard to the pandemic. I think we're going to have a mental health crisis if it isn't already occurring, and addictions. I think this is going to be something that we want to really have a handle on so that we're not increasing a problem that is developing within our communities. But I would really rely on AODA professionals. I would look into the medical world to find out what has happened. And I would look at these other states where they've rolled out the programs to see. So at this point, I would be in favor of medical marijuana, but hold on recreational.
Understand. Let's talk about property taxes, which you as a school board member have been wrestling with. School boards and local governments deal with revenue caps, per pupil spending limits, and they're there because Wisconsin has high property taxes, although right. Referendums, as you're aware, you can exceed those caps. A member of the assembly, would you continue to, would you say those caps and property tax limits need to stay in place, or is it time to get rid of them?
This is a really good question. And we have been struggling, of course, with how to fund things, funding formulas, and also the property tax burden. And as a school board member, I am very conscious of that. At our district, we are very fiscally responsible, and we have one of the lowest mill rates in the area. I think we ended up being 16th lowest in the state for K-12 education. So I'm very mindful of fiscal responsibility and taxpayers. I want them to keep more of their hard-earned money. That being said, I understand it's very difficult in operations to be able to afford to do the things you want to do, not only for your schools and your students, but also for your communities if you're a municipality. At this point, I'd be in favor of keeping the cap for the school districts, because I also just worked with our community, and we built a coalition and supported the investment in education. And I think that's important. For municipalities, boy, they're really in a tight spot right now as well. And one of the things recently that, honestly, we just were speaking with former Appleton Mayor Tim Hanna about this, is alternate ways of funding. And it's possible that what could really be helpful for destination areas is something similar to like what Green Bay did to build the Packer Stadium, where there was a 0.5% sales tax that was just for that project, and the city was allowed to take that and use that money. I think something like that for areas like, in my district, Appleton, we have the PAC, which draws people. We have a regional mall. We have athletic centers and the convention center. Possibly considering an alternative source of something like that, where it's a 0.5% sales tax for people coming into our area. Okay. And maybe then that the cities and the municipalities could then use that for their infrastructure. And it could help them. And it would be a trade-off, because it would relieve the property tax burden.
Would you consider raising the gas tax, now 30.9 cents a gallon, hasn't been raised in 10 years, as a stable source of highway funding for the entire state?
That's another good question. Again, you look at what the impact COVID has had, and it's impacting our state coffers again, our budget, because people weren't driving. Yeah. And so we weren't selling gas. And so again, with that, I would want to look at what are the potential alternative sources for funding. Is it something, I know tolls had been mentioned. I'm not opposed to that per se, but I would want to have more information about it. But one of the other things that I've thought about that I would consider proposing is registration fees, looking at registration fees, because of course we've got electric cars also. So, they're not purchasing as much fuel. So we're not bringing in that revenue. We need to look at it a different way. But registration fees for vehicles on a graduated basis might be something that would be more impactful instead of a flat fee. I know other states do that successfully. And the other big thing I would look at is, again, going back to that efficiency. Are we spending our money wisely? Are our projects efficient? Are we, our highway projects and our infrastructure projects, are we getting the best price? Are we efficient? Is there any wasteful spending? We've got to take a look at that because this is going to be a hard year. This is going to be a hard time for us. Right. So that's the way I've been looking at that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Two questions on the COVID pandemic. It depresses revenues. It also increases the reliance on healthcare services that state government pays for. We've seen the frontline role that hospitals are playing nationally and, of course, in Wisconsin. If you remember the Assembly voting on the next state budget, do you think hospitals deserve an even greater priority than they might have in the current state budget?
I know that our hospitals received some resources. This has been particularly hard on our healthcare system, for sure, as well as everything else. But if we're just looking at that for a moment, being in the healthcare industry myself with regard to the school district, and my husband works for, he's a physician. So I've seen, as well as frontline workers, our hospitals basically had to close down during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And just like a small business, they closed down for 2 months. And so that meant they suspended all unnecessary or unemergent cases because we wanted to be ready for COVID. We didn't know what was going to happen. And that was the right thing to do at the time. So I also know that places like in Theta Care here in our area, the CEO of Theta Care, as well as the higher level executives, took 40 and 50% pay cuts during that time. My own situation in our family, I know that we took over a 60%, decrease in revenue. I was still grateful that my husband had a job and was able to work, but it was on very limited hours. I would encourage going forward that we take a really close look at our situation. We get better prepared for the pandemic. So coming into this, we were not operating on a pandemic level. Our hospitals had maybe preparations for 30 days if we were lucky. So we got caught. And going forward, we need to, first of all, figure out a plan where we can separate the healthy people from those that are in COVID. We cannot afford, just like the economy, we cannot afford to shut down our hospitals and stop services to people for non-emergent things. They just fester and get worse and cost more later. We've got to continue serving our healthy population or keeping them healthy, as well as be able to handle whatever may happen with the COVID-19. So that's one of the things I would think we need to really look at. And the other is to have a better plan going forward with preparation. Instead of just a 30-day supply, we need to know exactly what the formula is. We need to have our equipment ready. We've got to have a longer term supply, and we need to know where we're going to be able to get it from. Our supply chains.
A follow-up question also on COVID.
Sure.
Do we need a law that says if a business has complied with the CDC or WEDC guidelines on safety and health dealing with COVID, if a business has complied, do we need a law saying they cannot be the subject of a frivolous lawsuit?
That is a really tough question. My thinking on that is that, it's going to be very difficult to enforce or prove. Are you asking me, so for example, if someone was at an establishment and got sick with COVID, contracted COVID, it would be very difficult to try to discern where they picked that up. My thinking on this is that what we really need to do is help our businesses to follow the protocols and get guidance in place and educate people on what needs to happen going forward as far as staying safe. I don't believe that there should be, yes, businesses need protection, but I don't believe that we're going to need to have a law in place that prevents frivolous lawsuits. I don't think that they're going to happen. I think you'd also need to look at, insurance. Insurance fraud could be a thing. I think we just need to be better at giving our businesses and establishments the guidelines and the advice and the information they need to be able to provide a safe and healthy environment. The problem really is now, and it's almost a visual thing. So whether we work with the CDC, I know out in Door County, they've done something like this. We've got to actually build consumer confidence. That's the thing that's happening. Businesses are opening. They're trying so hard to be able to welcome people back in a safe fashion. But what they've done in Door County is you can sign this pledge, and it's a visual thing. I'm doing these things for my employees, and I'm doing them for my customers. We're a safer business. The other thing that we've done is I've put forward a plan to offer businesses a safer small business tax deduction. So that we can assist businesses to be able to get those things in place, whether it's the temperature taking devices or the plexiglass shields or whatever it is with regard to that. We would like to assist them and make sure that they've got those things in place. And the other thing that we want to propose that I would like to see happen is, you mentioned the WEDC. They have released guidelines. The CDC has released guidelines. It's difficult to navigate that as a business owner. And so what we've done is we would like to also see a Office of Business Recovery within the WEDC. That could be a one-stop shopping place where our businesses could call, get someone on the phone, have a discussion about what tools are available to me, what are the guidelines, how do I implement these things, and how do I open and operate safely to my customers.
Almost out of time, so two more questions quickly. Do we need a law that says gives a preference to Wisconsin companies when local governments, including school boards, authorize major public works projects? The reason I ask is a study found in 2015 that out-of-state contractors got $72 million in these contracts, but that doubled to more than $146 million by 2018. Should local businesses have a preference for public work projects?
That's a good question. And on the surface, it seems like the answer should be yes, because you want to support Wisconsin business. What I know from being on the school board is oftentimes we are looking, we may be looking for the lowest bidder. So in order to get that, we often, encourage many different vendors to come and give us a bid. With Wisconsin on a greater level like that, I think what happens is you have to be careful and balance being able to have a cost-effective process versus supporting businesses that operate within Wisconsin. I know the governor of our past administration really liked to do things that way, because the thought was you would get the lowest bid. It was competitive, but then the winning bidder would often hire Wisconsin people and also source Wisconsin items. I think it's a balancing act, but definitely I would be in favor of supporting Wisconsin businesses.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so just quickly, summarize the difference between you and your opponent or opponents on August 11.
All right. Well, I think the difference is experience, for start. I'm a two-term elected Board of Education member and treasurer. I've helped to oversee a $90+ million budget. I've also eliminated a $100 million liability excuse me, for our district. I also know education very well. We work hard to prepare our students for career, college, technical college. We offer industry credentials so they can step right out and get into the workforce, which is going to be critically important right now. Also, we offer post-secondary credit yielding courses, and we require all our kids to take at least one. So then they come out and they have college credit. Should they go on to the tech college or college, they'll be there for a shorter amount of time and save them money. I also know healthcare. We have established a in-house clinic for our employees and staff. We also have HSA accounts for them, and we have a wellness program. And in so doing, I've saved our district hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we basically have hired people like my opponent, Rachel. And the other thing that I believe sets me apart is our pro-business plan. I really feel strongly that we have got to be out there working to help our small businesses. So again, we've got the small business, Safer Small Business Tax Deduction, as well as the Office of the Business Recovery. And those things right there are critical differences between myself and my opponents. The other thing I would say is I'm a long-term volunteer, and I have supported our community for over 20 years. I work at St. Joseph Food Pantry. I don't know if you can see behind me here, we did a food drive on the 4th of July. I've also been on the Neenah Menasha Emergency Society. That was a 10-year commitment, and we try to prevent homelessness in our community, as well as like Mike Rohrcast, Representative Rohrcast was on the board of directors for Samaritan Counseling. I'm also serving on the board of directors of Samaritan Counseling, so I know healthcare. I'm sorry, I know mental health care.
Mental health care.
And then the last thing I would say is I have been endorsed by our community. I've been elected 4 times, and that is the endorsement I need. I walk neighborhoods, I talk to people, I listen, and I learn from them. And that's the endorsement that I'm looking for, is to be able to advocate on behalf of my community members who have supported me.
Lauri Asbury of R-Neenah is a Republican candidate in the 55th Assembly District. The primary is August 11. Lauri, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.